I feel like I'm standing on holy ground today. A creative genius here with me, Charlie Peacock, Grammy award-winning producer, composer, artist, songwriter, author. Welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast, man. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So excited, man. Man, so much to talk about. To be honest with you, I have so many questions I want to ask you that I'm not going to probably get through half of this, but we'll
Yeah, well, you just tell me if you want to do them rapid fire, and I'll keep my answer to two sentences.
Oh no, that's all right. You do whatever you feel comfortable doing, man. But so much that you've been involved with, Charlie. I want to start with this. What other description could we add to the end of your name that maybe most people might be surprised by? Like chef, theologian, runner,
Oh, right.
coffee
Yeah.
connoisseur. What else?
I definitely have been called a lay theologian by some pretty distinguished theologian.
That's impressive.
I am a classic autodidact. For your listeners, basically, that means that I'm a self learner. And like my parents didn't know anything about homeschooling when I was a kid, but I would have been a classic candidate for homeschool. Instead, I went to high school where I was just miserable and left when I was 16 years old as a
Wow.
junior. So I finished high school, I graduated, but not without jumping through some hoops. So I left in my junior year because it was just not what I was made for. I needed to be on a self exploration track with mentoring help. I've had so many mentors in my life and people that have helped me. So it's not just a kind of ego driven desire for education. I love sitting at the feet of people
Mm.
who have something to teach and have been privileged to do that all throughout my life.
So did you graduate high school?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
I was 16 though.
okay. So you just finished
Yeah.
early.
Yeah. I finished after my junior year. So
Okay,
just
amazing.
went 3 years.
So where did the passion for theology, when did that start and where did that come from?
It didn't start immediately after becoming a follower of Jesus. I was more at that time just glad and joyful to be alive and to have forgiveness and have my meaning system restructured. And that was just such a huge relief for me. I've been really lost, just increasingly lost for many years. And so in the beginning, I was probably like a lot of young believers. I was just at the mercy of everyone that was around me. And this was, over 4 decades ago. So at that time, the eschatology, the end times teaching of the church was very much in the popular media. So there was a lot of emphasis on Jesus is coming back immediately, and there were popular books that were written and movies that were made, and it was a
Yep.
you don't really invest intellectually in anything because what's the use of it? I went with the flow of that for a while, but then my personality and my own curiosity got became too much, and I was just like, you know what? I that doesn't sound right. And the more that I read the Bible, the more it really doesn't seem right. It seems like people are looking for things that don't exist, and the things that do
Yeah.
exist, they're completely ignoring. So then it was then that I fortunately began to meet either some American expats that were had gone to Europe and got the fruit of what I would say the fruit of the inklings, the trickle down from C.S. Lewis and all of these great English thinkers and Dutch thinkers and people who had built a really robust theology for being deeply committed to Christ, but being stewards of the world. And so that opened up this whole theological pursuit for me where I wanted to know about that. I wanted to be equipped. I wanted to be
Mm.
theologically equipped and became interested in what is often called the intersection of faith and arts. And so I had two pressing questions. What does it mean to be an authentic disciple of Jesus? And what does it mean to be an authentic artist? And how do those work together for the good of the world and faithfulness to Christ's mission?
Mm, love that. We'll definitely dive into more of that. Charlie, what, like everyone knows you for your music, and now we know you as a theologian, but I read somewhere that your first paying gig was earning $5 from the Bogue Women's Club essay contest in
That's right.
1970.
That's right.
What was
That's
that all
right. I
about?
was a working writer. Yeah. I was a pretty voracious reader. I remember in 5th grade winning a prize for reading the most books that year of any student. And I don't recall what it was, but I just read all the time, and that really fed into what worked for me and made me feel good about myself, which was to have a certain amount of the time that I was living on earth living in my imagination.
Mm,
And that made me feel safe. And so reading was a way that I entered into my imagination through the work of others often. And then that naturally led to, oh, what would it be like if I were to write as well? And so I started writing stories, and I would take an interest in writing on a subject. Again, if I was interested in it, that goes to that autodidact thing. If there's something I was really interested in, I would be the A plus student. If I wasn't interested in it, who knows what kind of grades I would get. I just,
sure.
to me, everything had to fit. Like I was that painful student that you would say, "This is what I need you to do." And then I would say, "Why?"
The
I wanted
teacher.
to have, I always wanted the why. Now, why are we doing this? Why are you asking this of me? What's the end game of all the things that I am interested in? How does this one thing that you're asking me to do fit into that? And if it
Mm,
doesn't, let's discuss it, because maybe it's going to be just a waste of time for me. So as you can imagine, when you have a 15-year-old talking to you like that, and you're an adult or a teacher or something, then you're just like, oh man,
what am I
this
going to do
kid.
with this guy?
Yeah. Yeah. So eventually I just took matters into my own hands and just said, then I'll just leave high school.
Yeah. That's amazing. So your parents were okay with that decision?
Oh, no. Gosh, no. But they rolled with it. My dad left high school. He went all 4 years, but he went immediately into to play with the Air Force band. He was quite an accomplished trumpet player as a high school student. So he went and immediately played in one of several Air Force bands across the United States that would do ceremonies and dances. They had a dance band, and they had a concert band, and then parade band and all of that. And so he went and did that for 4 years. So he had some sense of, I know my son, and he is on this artistic path, and something's going to open up and it's going to lead somewhere.
Yeah. Do you get your love for music from your dad?
Oh, most certainly. Yeah. He was my first teacher, and I am his best student. I am his I am his biggest success story.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah. Yeah, we unfortunately he passed away in 1992, so I've
Wow.
had a long time without him now.
Yeah. What do you remember about his musicality?
I think that he very much leaned into two things. One, the genetics of it. And so for that, it would be the ability to create music without an instrument. So that means hearing music, being able to sing it, being able to extemporaneously improvise it, being able to sing rhythm patterns, having pitch, either relative pitch or perfect pitch, to have some idea of, like, you could say that's okay, ba, 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 right? And then you would say, all right,
Yep.
that's a C scale, or a C triad, an octave. And so he very much had those kind of, just what I would call sort of natural genetic gifting for music. But then he was a hard worker too, because he had a mentor, a high school teacher, that pushed him to be the best at the instrument. And he was. So he went, as you can imagine, went from being a high school student playing in the Air Force Band and went right into playing with some of the best players who maybe didn't have other opportunities, but they could, be in the armed forces and be with other players that were at a commensurate level. And then, of course, that drove each of them to improve and be better and better. And so by the time
Mhm.
he was 22 years old, and when I was being born and he was coming back home, it was the end of his time. He was a very accomplished trumpet player and band leader. He learned how to lead bands and how to play gigs and how to get work and how to have a repertoire and all of that. So that's the kind of thing that I grew up seeing,
Yeah.
that there was this educational element, a commitment to skill and ability, which of course then later, when Francis Schaeffer, through a little pamphlet called Art in the Bible, showed me that, oh, this is what God was doing when God wanted the temple built. He just didn't go and find someone who's, hey, I'll just zap you with the Spirit and then all of a sudden you'll have all this ability.
Right.
No, he went looking for someone who had the Spirit of God and skill and ability. So I saw, okay, so that's what's going on in terms of the theological part of it. So I need to be praying for the work of the Spirit in my life, all of the fruits of the Spirit. But I have a job too. I have a commitment, right? I have to show up. And just like I don't want to go down on an airplane with a pilot that hasn't put in the hours, or I don't want to go under the knife with a surgeon who hasn't put in the hours. You shouldn't want to hear songs from people who haven't put in the hours
Yeah.
or hear a trumpet concerto from a trumpet player who hasn't put in the hours. And so my dad's commitment to that later on was married to this theological component too. And then I
Yeah.
could see the cohesiveness of it.
Were you encouraged to pursue a career in music, or was it like Charlie, get a real job and pursue music
No,
on the side?
dad, he didn't know. He basically, his reality was you could play at the level of a pretty high symphonic level, right? And you could maybe get a gig with a symphony that could be full or part time. But most of his experience was playing in nightclubs or dinner theaters or things like that, like on a Friday and Saturday night. And so it was more like income that augmented what you were doing. So, like when I was a little kid, he worked for the phone company and then played every weekend.
Mhm.
And then he left the phone company. He played every weekend and he went back to school on the GI Bill and got his teaching credentials. So then he was teaching plus working for the state in the peach grading because come from a farm community, and playing on the weekends, Friday and Saturday night. Or
The
he would do
hustle.
residencies at places. So
Mhm.
he was a very hard worker. And he basically had three income streams that, and later, I mean, I saw that too. And it was different in my lifetime because income streams for me became, not just the regional thing, but they became worldwide because I was fortunate enough to create music that traveled around the world. I became more a part of mailbox income culture where I had enough songs traveling around the world as far as recordings that quarterly I was getting payments for that music. Dad never made it into that world. It was more I played a gig and I got paid for it. In terms
Right.
now, of course, I lived in that world for years and years too, but I was fortunate to have the intellectual property piece of it in terms of music publishing and recordings,
Yep.
which I've made hundreds of.
Yeah. Now, did that world even exist when your dad was younger?
It did exist.
Yeah.
It's just that he didn't have anyone in his life that would have been able to guide him through that. So when it came time for me, when I was thinking, hey, I think I'm going to be a working songwriter, a pop star, or jazz musician, or something like that. And he discouraged that because I think it was more like he just didn't want my ambition to get ahead of my ability and was just trying to be a dad.
Ground you in
And
reality.
unfortunately, I didn't interpret it that way. I interpreted it as him not believing in me.
Yeah.
Um, but he was just, again, because he didn't know. Now later he did get to see part of it before he passed away. So he did get to see, oh my gosh, no, I had no idea this world existed. I had no idea that all of these opportunities would be open to my son, and
Mm.
that he would be okay, and that he'd be able to care for his family and care for others. Not only that, have a business and have employees and have
Yep.
studios and all of that. He did get to see some of that and see that his earlier concerns were unfounded.
Yeah. Charlie, of all the things that you do, what's your favorite? Producer, writer, artist, musician? How would you answer
Mm,
that?
I think the most rewarding is still writing songs.
Why?
There's two elements of it. One is just sort of a cosmological fascination with the idea that there was nothing, then there was something. I love that. I love that idea as much as I've ever loved any idea. And so the idea that we could leave this conversation and you and I could both go off and in an hour end up with a song that would live for the rest of our lives. I love that idea. I love that uh, gift, and which leads into the other part of it, which is just the ability to do that. The sort of, when you're younger, you're developing these songwriting skills, and it feels very much as it should because you're investing in it, but it feels very much, hey, I'm doing this and I'm improving on my skill and ability. But then the older you get, you realize that really all you were doing all those years was just being faithful to this mystery that's actually inside of you, this embedded, what Christians think of as the image of God within humanity, the Imago Dei, and how that mystery, for me now, where music is, it's just a faucet. I can make 10 times as much music as I make now if I wanted to and I had the time and interest in doing it, because it really is just turning on the faucet. Now, what I'm not saying is that I'm guaranteeing the quality of it or I'm
Right.
guaranteeing the functionality of it. I'm not making claims to any of that. I'm just saying a fact that it's a witness. It bears witness to that this is what I was created for. This is what I was made for. And so that goes to our notions of calling and vocation. And otherwise, what is the explanation for it? That literally you could turn me on and just feed me and let me get a little bit of sleep, but I could write music without stopping until I passed from life to life. And that's just a fact. I have never run out of music yet. Don't think I would, because I think that I'm tapped into uh, the music of the cosmos, not by any doing of my own, but simply because this is a calling that I have a genetic disposition towards it. God is using it, I hope, for his glory and for the service of humanity and the world
Yep.
and the service of the church as well.
I think it's an inexhaustible world, personally.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
there are, and you hear this probably more than most artists who experience writer's block and feel like the well has dried up.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's actually true as much as it is
I,
getting yourself in the right situation and environment for
yeah.
creativity to thrive.
Yeah, that's hard. I find that very hard to believe. Although I know now there are very different kinds of artists, in the same way that if you were to look at personality tests or Enneagram or all of that, and you would say, okay, well, that Charlie's making these claims because he's a certain kind of personality type or Enneagram, right? And so that's why he can make those kind of claims. Whereas someone else might They may have that sort of faucet ability, but there's something that's keeping them from accepting that, right?
Yes.
Or it seems too improbable, or they're not confident. For me, philosophically, in terms of artistic philosophy, I'm very much a proponent of failure. I Because I am an improviser and I'm an editor. And so I have no problem with failing. In fact, as a record producer, I've used failure a lot to get the recordings to a place where they were unique. Because when you have everyone in the room trying to play everything right and correctly and not have their neighbor look at them sideways or critique what they're playing, like, why are you off way out there on a limb? Can't you hear what we're doing over here? I will intentionally disturb that process
Yeah.
and help people create the environment where people know that they can risk and fail so that they can find places to go musically that they otherwise wouldn't go. Because it's once you've done this for a while, anyone with experience can just go where the digits want to go, right? And just especially piano and guitar players who have all these patterns that I mean, you can always tell what a guitar player or piano player's patterns are by when they first sit down to the instrument. The very first thing they play, is
Hmm.
always going to tell you something about the history of how they learned to play that instrument.
That's right.
And so I realized that pretty early on and made it part of my toolkit to create a lot of different devices and language to help people break out of those patterns so that we could just stand 6 degrees over from the music and maybe be able to see it and hear it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Charlie, can you give us an example of that when you were producing in the studio and maybe a mistake that a musician made or an artist made
Yeah, absolutely.
actually
Yeah.
made it on the record?
Yeah, like here's a good example. Let's say that because there's a lot of things going on with each musical choice, right? It could be tone, it could be pitch, it could be the length of the pitch that's being articulated, it could be a rhythmic phrase. So let's just say it's a bass player and they have we're tracking in the studio and they play 5 notes in a row, and 2 of the notes are out of the key. And the bass player wants to punch in that. And for your listeners, by that, what I mean is just stop the recording and go back and fix
Yeah.
that. And I say to them, no, let's listen to it. I
Mm,
think there's something there. So we listen to it, and then the bass player goes, yeah, yeah, that's a really unique rhythm. And I said, yeah, so let's keep the rhythm and let's just fix those 2 bad notes. So that's an example of just paying attention to, like, all right, so you went somewhere, you risked, you did fail. In other words, we are going to fix it because I don't want those 2 wrong notes. But in the process of failing, you found something that you otherwise wouldn't have got to. And
yep.
now we're going to tweak that, learn from it. And when listeners hear this recording, they won't know that backstory, but we as artists do, because in a sense, we have a compact with each other to be more than just people who are sort of regurgitating what's already been done. I don't think that's the role of the artist. Maybe the role of music producers, maybe the role of certain people in commercial music. It's not my particular role, because my particular role is always rooted in the arts first before it's rooted in commercial considerations.
Mm,
So, because I've been, and part of that is I can tell you and your listeners that I do that with confidence because I've been rewarded for that
yep.
commercially as well. So it's not like I'm like, hey, just do something wild and crazy all the time. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you do this thing of familiarity and innovation well, and you do it seamlessly, then I have seen people be rewarded for that.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I naturally want to do. And I don't always get rewarded for it. Sometimes maybe I go too far with it, you know.
Yeah.
But I do like that. I mean, another thing that I've done in the studio that might interest some of your listeners is to play songs. Let's say you have a 4-minute song, and sometimes I would find that the best stuff keeps happening in the ending of this song. It's like now that all the musicians and the singers have played the song, they're like, whoa, I got through it.
They can
And now all
relax.
of this, yeah, now they're relaxing. So I started this method of where I wouldn't let them stop. So once they got to the ending of the song, I would just always go, keep going, right? And then I just let them play. And some of them would be like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, just play. Stop looking at me and just keep playing, right? Because and you feel that. I mean, these are like adults, right? But they're like scared kids. They're
Mm.
like, I don't know what to do. It's what do you mean you don't know what to do? You wouldn't be in this room if you didn't know what to do. So it's just like, keep doing it. And then I might say something like, okay, bass, drop out, right? And everybody don't change anything about what you're doing, but bass, drop out, right? And then I'll say to the artist, okay, now start the verse one again, and then they'll sing. And then that changes everything. Now people can hear the music in a fresh way.
Yep.
Because one of the things that drives me crazy about tracking records, and by band, I mean even if you're a solo artist, but if we were using a rhythm section, is the idea that people play all the time. But if you go listen to like a garage band, like a group of 15 to 18-year-old kids play, they have this beautiful way of resting or just clicking the sticks on the snare for the verse or laying out. Not everybody's playing all the time. They come up with these unusual parts, right? And so as people get better and better at their instruments, they just fall into these patterns of behavior that you just have to work overtime to break those patterns. The musician thinks that they are really demonstrating that they're very skillful, right?
Right.
And that's the last thing that I'm interested in. I've already determined that you're skillful enough to be in the room. Now, what I'm interested in is do you have the imagination to stay in the room?
That's good. Yeah, you don't have to prove yourself, you
No,
know?
there's
It's
nothing to
almost like
prove.
what you don't play is
Yeah,
just as important, if not more important than the notes that you do play.
absolutely. And a lot of, I'll do that too, in the editing. I'm a big post production person. When you play something for me and you hear it back on the album when it comes out, you might go, "Oh, wow. Like he edited the back end of all my phrases, you know?" And
Mhm.
then it's why did I do that? It's because you're taking up too much space. You
Mm.
made a great statement. You went ding da da da, and that was enough. I didn't need da 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 da. I didn't need you to answer yourself. You made a statement. Yeah, and that's just one of the roles of the music producer is the editing portion. Not everybody makes records like that, but I
Yeah.
do for sure.
What annoys you, Charlie, about how records are produced today? What would you change? I know that's kind of a broad
Hmm.
statement.
I do think that I think there's people making some really extraordinary records today, really extraordinary sounding records that I hear, like the young woman who's a big hit right now, Sabrina Carpenter, is that her name?
Yeah.
Her records sound great. They're very interesting, great production on them. And I tend to really like that hybrid for pop music. I like the hybrid production of live playing and using the DAW as an instrument as well, the digital audio workstation as an instrument. And I certainly do that. That's what I do. I mean, when I was a younger producer, that's what I was always dreaming of. I wish we could get inside the magnetic tape and move stuff around. So I love that hybrid. What I don't like is just where I'm just hearing the machine or I'm hearing drag and drop loops and beats that are just off the shelf that anybody can get on any of the sample services or beat services that are out there. I really still look for originality, and like as I said earlier, in the midst of familiarity.
Yeah.
And that's really what, because for me, I'm always looking for surprise. I'm a fan of timeless music, or music that obviously I've been a part of making some of the Americana folk music that's lasted over the last 15 years or so. But ultimately, I love to be surprised. That's why when I was a kid, I was such a fan of Miles Davis and John Coltrane and the jazz world, because every record was different and everyone was a surprise. And the Beatles were the same way. They were just so much about surprise. And I've just been bent in that way ever since. When I first heard Nirvana, I loved it because it sounded surprising. And the same way to me when I first heard just really well done hip hop. Like I can remember listening to a Missy Elliott record 20 years ago and just going, man, this is so cool. So it's not really the thing of it has to be live, or programming is bad, or making beats is bad. It's not, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just looking for a freshness, a
Yeah.
musicality,
Bravery.
something that will get me excited about music again and want me to stop what I'm doing and run upstairs and make something.
Why don't more artists pursue that bravery? Is it because they are trying to replicate what has worked in the past?
Yeah, I do think it's a cultural thing for sure. I think it's actually more important generationally right now to be part of a group, or a trend or a sound, and that your community, it forms your community. Whereas what I grew up in is that we had community because I didn't step on what my neighbor was doing, and they didn't step on what I was doing. Instead, we were like, we're in community together because we're all doing something pretty radically different. And even if you listen to the heroes of my generation that I grew up with, the voice of Smokey Robinson is demonstrably different than the voice of Bob Dylan. The voice of Sting is demonstrably different than the voice of Joni Mitchell. And I could just go on,
Right.
until everybody said, oh gosh, another boomer bragging on their generation. And that's not really the point of it. The point of it is to say, try to do that. Go to like indie pop right now on Spotify and try to do that. I guarantee you can't do that.
Wow.
I guarantee you can't play that game. You will not listen through to a 40 artist playlist and say, man, every one of these female vocalists is in their own lane doing an entirely unique thing.
Yeah.
It just won't happen. Instead, you'll say they're all sort of, wow, they all have these similar affectations, and they're just different timbre versions of Billie Eilish or something like that. And you
Yep.
just don't hear that phenomenal uniqueness of where something stands out. And to me, I think that's why we'll see after when all the boomers are gone. But so far, even through multiple generations, I know lots of like teenagers who, they think classic rock like the Beatles or the Doobie Brothers or whatever, it could be anything. They love it. And I think there is an attraction to the idea that instead of making things that all fit in this one thing, like for example, us having to deal with Drake for the last decade and all of these trap beats, it's please, seriously. And you think, oh no, now the next single, they're going to do something different. And it's nope, they're not, you know?
Right.
And so for me, I, I think there is an attraction, and I think it's a multi-generational attraction, and that when people really hear it, in fact, there's a whole culture of these surprise videos on YouTube. Have you seen them? Where you've got this person who's never heard Joni Mitchell before, and then they're listening for the first time, and then they do these reaction videos,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think that's to me again what I'm looking for. It doesn't I'm not looking for old music by old people. I would love nothing more than to listen to a 17-year-old who's just blowing my mind with something new. I mean,
Yeah.
when Prince was signed by Warner Brothers, he was 19 years old. And he had already carved out something completely unique, the foundation that he built on that said, hey, I'm a part of Black music history, but I am definitely going to give you a new version of it.
Yeah. Charlie, do you have any thoughts or opinions on church music or worship music today? Anything you like about it, or maybe what's concerning about what you're hearing?
Uh, Gosh, I see the place for organizing principles and organizing institutions and companies to come alongside songwriters and the church and organize and help distribute what may or may not be some of the best of what people are creating for the church. So I totally get that in terms of you have a music company that goes out and acquires publishing rights or acquires the talents of a particular producer or songwriter, and they work together to create music for the church. I get that. I have reservations about some of it, but I'm probably more interested in always positively promoting the idea that whenever possible in a church fellowship setting, if there are those that are in that body that can write music that's specific to that gathering of Christians,
Yeah.
and that's what I always want to be about encouraging, because that gathering has its own stories. It has its own interaction with the God of all that is and was and ever will be.
Yep.
And I want to hear their stories and songs so that when they say thank you, or when they say you did it, or when they say, may your name be praised above all names on earth and in heaven, I think there's something really uniquely special about it being deeply connected to the local body, to their stories, so that songwriters, when a child who has been injured in a car accident, lives to tell, and not only that, but flourishes and comes to healing, I think that should be a song. I think that's an opportunity for the body to thank God. And so anyway, that's more of the dreamer in me. Like I'll never stop having that dream. That's really what I want. I'm not trying to negate the other, but what I have seen is that if you don't promote the latter that I just described, then the other comes with front loaded with so much ideology that it's going to naturally overcome, and the church on its own will become lazy
Hmm.
because it's easier to do the plug and play. It's easier to get your ideas from someplace else. It's easier to say, hey, this song's super popular right now. I was at this conference last week and everybody was singing blah, 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 blah. And so then you bring that back to your congregation and you sing that song.
Yeah, and they love
And
it.
you know who that's really good for? That's really good for the songwriter and the publisher.
You're
And
preaching now,
having
Charlie. You're
and being
preaching.
a songwriter and a publisher, I know that. But again, I also know that if you want to use the model of the young church and you want to look at church history before we believed that everything in the whole world had to be branded and monetized, then you'll go back and you'll see the stories of how people wrote out of their experiences. So many of the hymns that we sing for churches that do sing hymns have these there, and there's a lot of books on it that you can find and read, but they have these very unique stories of where the songwriter had a particular experience of God in a particular place with particular people. So there's a particularity to it that I
Yes.
think makes it unique and gives it a gravitas, and oftentimes gives it that unique element that songwriters and publishers are trying to manufacture, but you get it without trying to manufacture it. And the spirit is present in it, and people pick up on that. And I mean, that's my take on it.
That's so good, man, because we have gotten lazy. It is easier just to plug and play, like you said. Oh, this is working over here, and you
I
know it's gonna work in your church too. If it works there and your
Yeah,
people are loving it, they're gonna love it at your church too.
let's just park there for 1 second,
Yeah.
because this has been my argument for decades: is that we would, all of us in the arts, as we intersect with Christian faith in Christ alone, all of us would do well to rid ourselves of this kind of pragmatism, because the worst part of pragmatism is when you call something good because it works.
Hmm.
And that's, I don't see that's what the Bible teaches about what we're supposed to be about. In actuality, what the cross of Christ teaches us is that something can look like failure and be good.
Whew.
In fact, it can have such great consequences of good that it will go on and ripple on for centuries and centuries.
Wow.
So we have to be super careful about this notion of what is working. That doesn't sound like a calling to me. That sounds like sales.
Mm.
And so it's not that, hey, I've said it's working before. So I'm not trying to say that I haven't said that. But I'm aware that when you say that too much, you're stepping into a space that may capture your imagination in a way that is unhealthy.
Mm. Charlie, that is what we're saying. I'm a worship leader, and in those spaces, we're all just looking for what's working. We just want to have meaningful, powerful worship experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so, hey,
Yeah.
what's working at your church? Oh, let's try that. But
Yeah.
it
But it's like
does
working by what criteria? Working by,
hands in the air.
there was 377 hands raised on this song. So and so cried. Someone came up to me afterwards, said, I love that song. Where can I find it? Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of superficial ways that we can judge things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as worship leaders or people who choose the songs of the church, who are part of this grand organization of music and the Christian church, ultimately, the only way to truly judge any of this is the fruit that it bears.
Yes.
And you don't see that fruit except superficially in the sanctuary. And there are so many affectations attached to Christian behavior, with the body, with the mouth, what we say, how we react, how we hold our head, what we do. Not only that, that's multiplied by all these different denominational affectations, all of these kinds of things, so that in one body, something might look like it's working, in another body, it might not. For
Yeah.
example, years ago, I played in Finland, and the very first song this is 30 years ago, and very first song, I was like, man, we are tanking. This is I am just like the wrong person for this audience. And it literally, like, people sitting on their hands with the most miserable looks on their faces, just like you're just sinking, you're failing. In the first song, people jump out of their seats. They're screaming, yelling, clapping, and then, as if they were being conducted by a conductor, they just sit right back down, and they're back in that mode. Okay, so that's a cultural thing, right?
Yeah,
Within 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, I experienced the idea that I'm not worthy. They don't like me. They don't like this song. It's not working. To being whiplashed over to, oh, it is working. And yet, I wasn't asking the question, will there be good fruit from this performance 6 months from now?
that's so good. How do we, as worship leaders, how do we evaluate fruit?
The only way you're going to know fruit is to be in community with the people that you're leading in worship.
That's good.
That's it. There
Yeah.
is no other way to know.
Yeah. Which is really important, Charlie, because there's a little bit of this kind of celebrity culture that can creep in where it's like, you roll out the talent on stage and
Oh, gosh, yeah.
but you're not really invested in the community. People don't know you, you don't know other people. You're the worship leader
Mhm.
celebrity, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
a healthy place to be.
Yeah. I've had friends who have done residencies. I've got a friend right now who goes to a city that's 1,000 miles away from their home twice a month to be a worship leader, right? It begs the question, is there no one in your area that can lead worship at your church? And we know that's not
Seriously.
true. We know it's not true. So we know that there's a, and this person or these people that I'm thinking of, they're excellent at what they do.
Yeah.
So there's a reason people want them to come to their fellowship. So I get that. I want to be sensitive to that. And also, I'm not trying to take their gig away from them, but I am saying that what's most important is to ask the question, hey, what's behind this behavior? Why did we decide that this was a good idea?
Mm.
And what are our ultimate motivations behind it? Like, for example, if you peeled the onion back and then ultimately, if everybody in the room say it was your worship team and church board or whatever it might be, some governing body, and you all sit around and you go, honestly, it's because it draws people in and it gets more people in the building and it makes us feel more popular. And it's like we're the cool church because we have this worship leader or like that. Then at that point, if everybody came to that point, then everyone should look at each other and go, that's not right, is it? And maybe we can't turn the Titanic around overnight, but we can definitely back up from this. And so let's pray and see what that means to reevaluate this and take a look at it.
Yeah.
But if you had the same conversation and came up with all kinds of really positive, in a sense, Jesus congruent kinds of ideas, then yeah, carry on.
That's so helpful. Charlie, I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to let you go here soon because we're almost at an hour. And I'm sure you got a lot of other things to do today, but this is really helpful. I want you to talk, and this is probably a question you've answered hundreds of times throughout your career, but I want you to talk about your experience with Switchfoot. I
Mhm.
know that you're
Sure.
largely responsible that they became what they became. And so I want to just hear the early days. Talk about the early days of discovering John
Yeah,
Foreman and the boys and how you helped to launch their
sure.
career.
The thing that I'm primarily responsible for is just hearing and seeing first beyond their small circle of family and friends, but somebody who was in the music industry, just being the first to see and hear what they would become. But that was also my calling, and part of my gig was to extrapolate outward from a single note played, extrapolate outward from a lyric idea, extrapolate outward from the discovery of a band, all of that. It's having eyes to see and ears to hear and the imagination to say, okay, based on what I hear and see, I think it's probable that these things will happen. So, in many ways, that's the eyes of faith, right?
Yeah,
at work. It's a confidence not in myself so much as a confidence in a calling that I've been equipped to see and hear these things. So I think that's really what my contribution was, is that I heard and saw what I used to call a bunk bed band. I've said like they were one step below a garage band. They practiced in a bedroom with bunk beds, and to hear in that what would become one of the best, in my estimation, one of the best bands in the world.
for
And they've
sure.
been together for 25 years now, and their career, it just speaks for itself, and it speaks loudly. We did what we set out to do, which was to answer the questions that I proposed in the beginning of this podcast. What does it mean to be a faithful follower of Jesus, and what does it mean to be a faithful artist, and how do those two work together?
Yep.
And we had the joint mission that we wanted to take the music beyond the church as well. And we did that. We had four major pop singles with the band, and they've continued that pattern of being really doing, I would say they have done, in some ways, even though I was there helping them, I was like a stone in the river that they stepped on to get to the other side, right? Because I had already been there doing some of that experimenting.
Yeah.
And so both Steve Taylor, who's a best friend of mine, I was doing that with Switchfoot, and he was doing that with Sixpence None the Richer. And our goal was not to completely detach them from the church, but to definitely, I have a phrase, God's musical person everywhere and in everything. And so that's the specific calling. Now, a worship leader may say, okay, that's not my particular calling. My calling is God's musical person with the church.
Right.
And that's great to be able to say that and own that and say, that's what I do. That's not what I do. And I think you know my music well enough that you'd look at my discography and you'd say, oh, he's served the church here. He's done that. He's had pop hits. He's had folk Grammys. He's had, so it would be like, and that's why I would say, yeah, my calling is to be God's musical person everywhere and in everything, in as much as God allows for that. That's Switchfoot's calling as well.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Switchfoot song or maybe most meaningful to you?
I'd have to mention Dare You to Move, just because we
Legendary.
recorded that song together. And when it was happening, when I was recording John's vocal, I just knew that song. It was one of those things where it's like half the time I wasn't quite sure exactly what it meant, because it is a bit of a non-specific song in terms of story narrative. But
Right.
I think that's what makes it work, because everyone feels it in their own unique way. And there was just, no matter how many times I sat and worked on that song, comping vocals or doing overdubs on it or any of that, I was always just deeply moved by it. And I accounted for that through the Spirit of God. To me, it was like, okay, there's just something going on here. And, it's a privilege when you encounter that with music, when you just, it feels like it is human, it's broken, it's imperfect, but there's something traveling with this song that can only, for at least for a follower of Jesus, I just think of it in terms of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And then when John Fields had the opportunity on the first record that we did for Columbia, and he was in the producer's seat, he had the opportunity to bring that song back around, because Columbia Records, they weren't stupid. They knew there was something going on there too. And then they just blew up our original version, which was, they did a version that took some of the tracks, and some, this might be a nice bit of trivia that people wouldn't know, took some of the tracks from the original version and then recorded over the top of them, sort
Oh,
of
really?
with, with their newer sounds, newer abilities. Because we're fast forwarding like 2.5 years later when John produced his version of that. That was we'd already had a number one hit on the song in terms of contemporary Christian music and that part of the distribution scheme. But it was really the song that just burst open the whole rest of the world for Switchfoot.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to come back to that song. But yeah, I'm so proud of those guys, the men that they became and the families they have. And so now, like Andy, my wife and I, when they come to town, we'll go see them at the Ryman Auditorium or something here. And we're hanging out with their grown children now,
It's great.
So
It's got to be hard to fight
uh,
back the tears when you see them live, I'd imagine.
oh, I pretty much usually cry every time. Yeah. Yeah, I do. And I try. In fact, I think the last time I went, oh no, that was another thing. I was going to say that another great thing about them is like when the road manager is also somebody who used to work for me. So whenever they play in town, we get the most amazing parking spot, like literally right in front of the venue.
Amazing.
So that's one of the perks of
For sure.
Switchfoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charlie, as you and I'm almost done here, but as you look back on your career and all the projects that you've been a part of, maybe outside of Switchfoot and Dare You to Move, is there another song or project that's maybe that's very meaningful to you?
Wow. I would say right now, the two most meaningful projects for me are my new recording, which I didn't expect to make. I didn't expect to make another recording, but I
Why not?
made this recording called I just didn't I've been writing songs, I've been putting music out, but I think I didn't expect that at 68 years of age, I would connect again with one of the entertainment corporations, with Universal Music, and put out a sort of legit recording. It's
Yeah.
one thing to put recordings out and release them either with small teams or put them out on a Friday night and buy Facebook ads and work the single for a month or so, but it's another thing to to actually interact with a whole marketing and promotion team and all of that. And I hadn't done that for a couple of decades.
Wow.
So to come back at my age and do that record, but the reason was is my son just believed in the record so much, and he was just like, "Dad, you have to really take this record seriously." And the more I did, the more I saw this recording as part of a whole story that's unfolding over the course of a few months here. And that is that I've been a working musician for over 50 years. And this record, if I were to stop at this record, I would be content. I would
Wow.
feel like this record is, if you want to hear what it sounds like for a person who's been a working musician for 50 years, a working songwriter, what would their last record sound like if it were to be their last record?
Hmm.
Then listen to this record, because I would be content. If you said I couldn't make another one, I'd feel like, you know what? I, I did what I came to do.
Wow.
And so there's a real confidence in that. And secondly, it, the reason why I didn't think I was going to do a record is because I was going to be promoting my book, which is I have this memoir that's coming out February 4th of 2025. So really just 5 months from now or 4.5 months from now. And that was a period on the end of the sentence too. Okay, I've lived this life and now I'm able to reflect on it. And I hope that there's something that others can learn from my experience. It's hard that my dad was a teacher. It's hard to take the teacher out of me too. But I really just had this narrative that I wanted to get out. And then as it happens, so the book comes out February 4th. And then on May 18th, I'll celebrate my 50th wedding anniversary
Wow.
with my girlfriend, with my high school girlfriend.
That's incredible.
So, in some ways, it feels like these three elements, the marriage, the music, and the story, And you mentioned earlier, hey, that's my first gig, $5 for writing.
That's right.
So it feels this is a celebration. It's a time to say thank you to people, to all the people that have blessed me and helped me along the way. And of course, ultimate thank you to the God of the cosmos that loved me enough through Christ to give me breath and to give me life and to give me meaning and mission. And yeah, so I think that really says what this time is about for me.
Yeah, I love that. The record, Charlie, is beautiful, and for those that are wondering, it's called Every Kind of Uh-Oh.
Kind of oh,
It's a beautiful record. I love the simplicity of it, the voices, just the richness of, like, your voice, obviously, but then so many other voices, and almost there's a
mm-hmm.
choir a part of a lot of songs.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
what I really wanted to come back to that. I really, um, in the 80s and 90s when background vocals were such a big thing, that was always one of my favorite parts of making records was working with these extraordinary background vocals. So I actually brought back some people, Vicky Hampton, who's full time with Garth Brooks and his Vegas residencies, but she and I made tons of records together. She sings on Every Heartbeat, for Amy Grant. She's one of the singers on that song. And
wow.
so we've been working together for a long time. And then a great gospel soul singer, Darwin Hobbs,
Yep,
is on there. And then, of course, my own children, my son, Sam Ashworth,
yep.
and his wife, Ruby Amonfu, who's an extraordinary vocalist. And then my granddaughter, Bridget Ashworth, sings on there as well. So
That's
that's our kind
amazing.
of our choir, our little choir that
That sounds so good.
frames a few of the songs. And then on three of the songs, my friend Sarah Groves sings with us as well.
Yep. She's brilliant.
Oh, she is, yeah. Yeah, she's America's secret to me. She just is one of the greatest living songwriters we have.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love, the chord progressions too, Charlie. It's almost like as I'm listening to it, you're, like, calling me out because 'cause I'm a 1-6-5-4 guy. Like,
Yeah,
I stay in that world too much, but in, like,
yeah.
almost all of your songs, you introduce this surprising chord that's, "Wait a second, what just happened there?"
Yeah, that's right.
I love it.
That's
Do you have
right.
a favorite chord
That's right.
progression?
I don't. No, I don't. I do these. My granddaughter comes in and works with me once a week doing admin things and just whatever we need. But we always have these little teaching sessions where we'll be working on something and then it'll be like, "Did I ever tell you?" And then I'll explain something to her. And it was just not long ago that I was helping her see that every chord is lawful. And I was showing her how it's the melodic movement that makes sense of the chords. And so I said, write down any chords, right? I said, so give me 8 chords. But make sure they're not in the same keys. Like I would write down C minor and F sharp major and B minor and D flat major or whatever, right? So she does her best to write down these abstract chords, and so I said, okay, so I'm going to do them in the exact order that you wrote them,
I
right?
love this.
And so I play through them once, make music out of them. I do some voice leading. It's supposed to be incongruent, but the voice leading that I choose between the chords starts to add some congruency. They stretch your ear, granted, but they're not totally improbable, right? And
Yeah.
so then I said, now watch this. So then I'm to play it, and then I sing over the top of it, just nonsense lyrics, but just singing a melody, and show her how all these half step movements, right, and this interval dropping down and leading tones, and how once I've done that, now this thing that you thought couldn't possibly work all of a sudden makes total sense.
What a brilliant exercise.
That's how you find new music. You just have to say, you have to You can't have any of the sort of guitar strummer mentality, or you can't have the music school mentality. So you can't be undereducated or overeducated. You just have to be willing and willing to make a mistake. I mean, I've gone down plenty of experimental chord roads, and in the end just said it's different, but it's not beautiful or interesting.
Right.
You know? So
Yeah,
yeah, you still have your artistic judgment, but if you don't go down that road, then you won't find anything new.
that's right. Charlie, do you have a favorite instrument that you would never sell?
Yes, I would definitely never sell my Yamaha C7 grand piano. Yeah.
Why is that?
No, it has sentimental value. I mean, there's a lot of hundreds and hundreds of recordings that have been made on it. It doesn't get recorded anymore because it's not in the studio per se now. But do you know the record producer Michael Omardian? That name?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Are you a yacht rock fan at all?
No, tell me
All
about
right.
it
Well,
though. I'm not even familiar. Yacht
okay.
rock?
Yeah. Well, okay. Yacht rock is just basically hit songs from the past that sort of all sort of work together. And it's if you went on Spotify and just typed in yacht rock, they give you a yacht rock
Oh,
um,
okay. Yeah, I've never heard that term
playlist.
before. I'm getting an education
But
today.
it would be bands like Christopher Cross
Okay.
and Doobie Brothers with Michael McDonald and a whole bunch of different groups that once you heard them all play together, you'd say, "Oh yeah, I could see myself sailing in a
Sure.
yacht listening to this."
100%.
Um, but anyway, the reason why I brought up that name is that Michael was a very well-known music producer in the 80s and 90s and had tons and tons of hit songs. Prior to that, he worked with in Christian music and worked with Second Chapter of Acts,
Mhm.
which was an early Jesus movement group. But anyway, I was at his house years and years ago, and he had this beautiful Yamaha C7 grand piano in the living room. And he's quite a brilliant person and a character. And I said, I love your piano. He goes, yeah, Yamaha gave it to me. I've got another one downstairs just like it, except it's dark brown. And I was like, oh my gosh. So the first thing that came into my mind, thinking of myself, was like, if Yamaha would give Michael Omardian two grand pianos, maybe they'd give me a half of one because I'm no Michael Omardian. And so a few days later, I called him and I said, hey, would you mind introducing me to your representative at Yamaha? And he did, and he put a good word in for me. And sure enough, they gave me 50% of the piano.
Wow.
Yeah, so they gave me an artist deal on this piano. And that's how I ended up with it. I never would have got it. I couldn't have afforded it.
That's incredible. You gotta ask though,
And
you miss 100% of the shots that you never take, right?
that's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, man. Charlie, this has been so fun. I just wanna let our listeners know we already talked a little bit about the record, Every Kind of Uh-Oh. You talked about your memoir, which is releasing in a few months, Roots and Rhythm.
Hmm.
So be on the
Yeah.
lookout for that. Maybe we can even do a follow-up conversation around the release
Ah, I
of
love
that.
that.
Would love that.
I love that. Yeah.
And we didn't talk much about this, but I also want to let people know about the book that you wrote with your wife, Why Everything
Yes.
That Doesn't Matter Matters So Much, The Way of
Mhm.
Love in a World of Hurt. Just beautiful, a beautiful title. And I know we don't have time to go into that, but I wanted to let our listeners know about that. That is available. That had to be fun writing that with your wife, huh? Who is an author.
Oh, she's quite a writer. Yes, highly recommended. I would say for your listeners too that apart from the wonderful things that Andy has to say in it, your listeners might key in on. There is a chapter called The Role of the Artist in the World that could be helpful.
Yeah,
And there's also a chapter on naming things Christian. It's called The Christian Name Game, which can also be, I think, helpful to musicians.
yeah, so good. Charlie, thank you, my friend. Let's do this again
Yeah,
sometime. Appreciate
thank
you.
you. Thank you. I appreciate you as well.